Party leader Patricia De Lille says while the incarceration of the former president is not a cause for celebration, the country's justice and policing system showed great resilience under extreme pressure. Zuma was arrested on Wednesday, minutes before Constitutional Court incarceration order expired. In the tense build-up to his detention, hundreds of his supporters descended on Nkandla, vowing to lay down their lives for him. It's still unclear what will happen next, as the Pietermaritzburg High Court and the Apex Court are yet to decide on his efforts to try have his sentence set aside. From a perspective, many voices weighing in. Let's get a sense of how Patricia De Lille is feeling about this. She, of course, is the leader of the Good Party. Minister, great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time for us here on the AM Report. So you have joined the growing chorus of people celebrating the rule of law in this country while lamenting Jacob Zuma's fate. However, to what extent do you think this will actually bolster law enforcement agencies being able to go for high-profile cases?
Ayanda, thank you and good morning. Very few countries in the world have gone through what we have been going through over the past few months, really to the extent of testing our law enforcement agencies, testing our constitution, and, that we should all uphold the rule of law. And as we are not celebrating to see former President Jacob Zuma going to jail, what we can celebrate is that the rule of law prevailed, sanity prevailed, and again, I can say, especially to our police, that they have kept to the Constitution. I'm sure the storm is not over yet, but for now we can celebrate that we are all equal before the law, like our late President Tata Madiba said, that, even as the president or former president, we are all equal before the law.
Yeah, I mean, most of my question, do you think that, for instance, the NPAs, the Hawks, now feel a bit more emboldened to come after those high-profile cases or people implicated in high-profile cases, given the fact that we're waking up in a country where a former president may very well land up behind bars?
I do think that the NPA and the other law enforcement agencies are really trying their best, and every case must be looked at its merit. And we have seen in the past some high-profile people being arrested, even though, the patience of South Africans are running out. People are very impatient. They want to see more high-profile arrests. But I must say that we must grant the law enforcement agencies, the NPA and others, also the necessary space that they do gather all the evidence, so that when they finally go to court and arrest people, that we know that they have a solid case. But I do think that we have seen, especially in the past year, 18 months, that there are great movement on the side of the NPA.
Right.
Yes.
In the last 24 hours or so, a lot of the commentary around the former president's incarceration also centered the contribution he's been able to make in getting South Africa to a democratic dispensation. To what extent should that factor in any effort to try expedite any kind of parole the former president will have, do you think?
Well, no factor should influence our judicial system. Whether it is your age, whether it is your contribution to the freedom of our country, but only what the evidence and the witnesses before a judge, and the judge then use his or her discretion. So we do recognize the role that former President Jacob Zuma played in the struggle for freedom in our country, and so did many, many other millions of people do the same. And therefore, we must be very, very cautious that we don't create a perception that some are more equal than others. In fact, that, what we have seen, it prevailed yesterday, the day before yesterday, is that we are all equal before the law. But we do recognize the role that President Jacob Zuma played in the struggle for freedom in our country.
Yeah, so we recognize it, but it shouldn't really matter when it comes to how the law treats them. Am I understanding you correctly?
It can't matter, because we are all equal before the law. And that is why I say that, the rule of law prevailed. It illustrated in no uncertain terms that we are all equal before the law. And that, for me, is good. It's a good principle for our democracy.
Yes. Interesting,
yes.
You mentioned that the DA still maintains, though, despite the fact that we've averted what's been described as a looming constitutional crisis, that there's still a need for Parliament to convene and have an urgent debate around what's happened, but more to the point, for the National Assembly to reaffirm its commitment to abide by the rule of law. As a parliamentarian yourself, do you think that's still necessary?
I think the DA is confusing issues as usual. We must respect the separation of powers between the executive, parliament, and the judiciary, and especially when it comes to our judiciary. The judiciary has shown in the past that they will not hesitate to act against anyone where there are excesses. And we must respect that independence of the judiciary. And as political parties, as much as we have opinions, but remember, we are also subject to the very same constitution where the separation of powers is enshrined. So I think that they must think more about the principle rather than just reacting to an event, because these events will come all the time, they will come and go, but the principle of separation of powers will always be enshrined in our constitution.
Interesting you mentioned that, because there's also a feeling that the judiciary is doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to how these different arms of government work. But it's great to get your take nonetheless. That's all the time we have. Patricia De Lille is the leader of the Good Party and, of course, has been a member of the DA in the past as well. Probably important to mention that. But that's just an aside. Patricia De Lille, once again, thank you.